The year was 2017. After a very middling start to the Star Wars sequel trilogy in The Force Awakens, I sat down in the theater to watch Rian Johnson's take on the Star Wars universe. I am not being hyperbolic when I say that movie single-handedly destroyed Star Wars for me forever. At the very least, for as long as it is in Disney's incapable hands. I can even pinpoint the exact moment for you. It wasn't the character assassination of Luke Skywalker. It wasn't the utter pointlessness of Canto Bight. It wasn't even the walking plank of wood and girl bossery that was Rey. It was the moment where, in the final act, they destroyed Anakin Skywalker's lightsaber. A relic of incredible significance not only in-universe, but in the real world as well. That lightsaber represented the legacy of Star Wars, and what it meant to me and millions of other fans around the world. It was a through line that had persisted for almost 50 years, sparking the imaginations of children and adults as they played lightsabers in their driveways and backyards. In that moment, I realized exactly what Star Wars meant to Disney, to Lucasfilm, and to Kathleen Kennedy. It was a vehicle to push their agendas. It was a cash cow to bleed over and over again until it lay dead, and their mouths were wet with its blood. To them, Star Wars was simply an IP to be exploited and bled until they could exploit it and bleed it no more. And I wanted no part of it. Since then, I have stalwartly refused to watch a single new piece of content that Disney has put out in this universe, and it is a pledge that I hold to, even to this day. Luckily for me, however, the year before, in 2016, they managed to release a movie that, I'm sure in spite of their best efforts, actually managed to be a good companion piece to not only the original trilogy, but the prequels as well. I'm speaking, of course, about Rogue One. Set immediately, and I mean immediately, before the events of Episode 4, Rogue One follows the story of Jyn Erso and Cassian Andor as they work to steal the Death Star plans from a fortified Imperial archive on the planet Scarif. Now, I'll freely admit that after the underwhelming excursion that was The Force Awakens, I went into Rogue One with low expectations. To be frank, I went in looking for things to be upset about. And guess what? I found them. But every movie ever made, ever, has things to be upset about. And unfortunately, I didn't give Rogue One the credit or the respect that it deserved. Once it came to streaming, however, I watched it a couple more times and I began to appreciate Rogue One for what it was. A fun romp in the Star Wars universe that is well acted, well directed, and most importantly, well intentioned. With enough nods to the wider canon and even one to Legends, I realized how much love went into its production. Now, this is not going to be a frame-by-frame breakdown. Rather, I want to take a look at a few of the macro themes and ideas that went into the production, while briefly zooming in at key points in the story to show some of the truly badass stuff they managed to fit in. All of this is to say that a working knowledge of the movie is essential, as there will be minimal context for my commentary. Alright, ready? Here we go. First off, I want to talk about Diego Luna as Cassian Andor. Prior to this movie, I'd never heard his name before, and here he comes just exploding onto the screen as a cold-blooded Alliance spy. Executing an informant to prevent his capture is the perfect way to introduce an agent that understands the realities of war and espionage. He takes no pleasure in the act, but he knows he can't let this informant fall into Imperial hands. Additionally, this serves as a way to show the audience that he will do what is necessary, so when the time comes to kill Galen Erso, the tension is there, because there is no doubt in the audience's mind that Andor will pull the trigger. This sequence is doubly effective, as when he can't do it, it reveals the changes he's undergone after meeting Jyn. Speaking of, I'd like to comment on his relationship with Jyn Erso, played by Felicity Jones. I am so glad they didn't try to shoehorn a love story between these two characters. Don't get me wrong, the chemistry between the two actors was definitely there, it just would have been completely unnecessary, and would have cheapened the forged by war friendship they developed throughout the course of the movie. To be frank, the brilliance with which they wrote Cassian Andor and Diego Luna's portrayal of him have been the only things that have made me even want to consider watching some of the Star Wars content they're churning out on Disney+. Another piece of the Rogue One puzzle, which made the story sing, was the lens through which we view the Rebel Alliance. Up until this point, and only through the lens of the movies, mind you, we have seen the Alliance as a unified bloc that stands in opposition to the Empire. We tend to forget that they're an insurgency, and a galaxy-spanning one at that. Hundreds of thousands of people from literally every walk of life imaginable, only united in that they want to bring down the Empire. Rogue One shows us the kind of infighting that an organization like this would have. We learn that Saw Gerrera, Jin's savior when she was a child, has been kicked out of the Alliance and labeled an extremist. Whatever the hell that means for a bunch of people who've already been called terrorists by the Empire. We see this infighting again later in the movie, when the leaders of the various factions within the Alliance debate what to do with the information Jin and Nandor have brought them. To further add to our understanding of the Alliance, we're shown the kind of guerrilla tactics an organization such as this would have to use. Now, admittedly, Gerrera's troops are the shittiest kind of guerrilla fighters, as evidenced by their utter lack of self-preservation instincts, but in the final act we see how powerful such tactics can be, when the Alliance proper assaults Scarif. Infiltration, sabotage, and ambushes are executed perfectly here, and it's only by the weight of numbers and tech that the Empire regains the upper hand. As an aside, I'd like to mention the oddly specific niche that Donnie Yen has managed to carve out for himself as the role of blind martial arts badass. He played the same character in John Wick 4.
Which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice, right?
Now, as we've seen ad nauseum over the last few decades, Hollywood has gone all in on CG and special effects. At its worst, this can be an active detriment to the movie, pulling the audience out of the experience and making them cringe internally. At its best, CG and special effects augment and complement the movie, allowing the filmmakers to do and show things they wouldn't have been able to do and show otherwise. Rogue One is CG at its best. To begin with, I'd like to point out the brilliant use of scaling and showing just how goddamn big the Death Star is. We see a TIE fighter, which we can roughly compare to the size of an X-Wing, whose size we already know, as it flies towards a Star Destroyer. This allows us to get a rough sense of how truly massive Star Destroyers are. Then we pull back to show a full fleet of Star Destroyers against the background of the Death Star. This is the only time in Star Wars history that I've ever been able to come close to comprehending the true scale and terror of the Death Star. It's a truly brilliant piece of filmmaking. Then there's Tarkin and Leia. Now, as a general rule, I'm not a fan of using CG in this manner to de-age an actor, or in Peter Cushing's case, bring them back from the dead. But in this instance, it serves the story and makes narrative sense. It wasn't just used as a member berry to try and push some unearned nostalgic feels on the audience. Even if you don't know who Leia and Tarkin are in relation to A New Hope, it makes sense for them to be there. Finally, I want to show you the piece of this film that told me this movie was being made by true fans of the franchise. The one point where I almost jumped out of my seat for joy. I give you the Hammerhead. Now, I realize that most of you probably don't care about this. It looks like just another spaceship doing something that looks fairly ridiculous. But to me, this is a callback to my childhood. This ship was one of the primary Starship assets to be used in the greatest Star Wars game of all time, Knights of the Old Republic. The ship didn't need to be in this movie. They could have easily come up with some other design that did the exact same thing. And the fact that it is here tells me everything I need to know about the people who made this movie. Additionally, I'd like to mention how cool it is that they used archival footage from A New Hope to maintain continuity in the starfighter squadrons of the Alliance. Red Leader and Gold Leader both make appearances in this film, a film which also answers the unasked question of how Luke Skywalker received his call sign of Red 5. The previous Red 5 died in the Battle of Scarif. Now, as you've probably figured out by now, I would heartily recommend Rogue One to both entrenched fans like me and those who've maybe only got a cursory interest in Star Wars. No matter which way you slice it, it's a damn good film. And I'll tell you something else. Watch this movie if for no other reason than the final act on Scarif. From the moment the commando team touches down, this movie fires on every damn cylinder until the credits roll. I'll admit the planetary shield on Scarif might be a bit much. I certainly don't remember it from Legends, which is the one true canon in my opinion. It adds unnecessary tension to an already tense sequence and adds yet another question mark in terms of the in-universe technology, but I'll overlook it. Hell, I'll even overlook the hyperspace tracker program, even though it was only there as a way to preemptively retcon The Last Jedi. The last act of this movie is that good, and the cherry on top of it all is Vader. Vader, oh Vader, oh Vader. Perhaps more iconic than his first ever on-screen appearance, this is Darth Vader at his finest. You can hear the bulkheads groan and flex in response to his power, and you can see the crawling dark as it reaches out, and then the lightsaber. This whole sequence is indicative of the filmmaker's understanding of who and what Darth Vader is. Gone are the flips and spins and flourishes of Anakin in the prequel trilogy. Vader physically can't do that anymore. There is an economy of motion at work here, no wasted movement, and you can feel the power he puts behind each strike. Paired with his considerable Force abilities, you've got a Dark Lord of the Sith that is fully deserving of his title. And then that's it. A quick flash of Leia and the credits roll. It's almost funny how quickly they ended it after the Vader sequence. It's like they're saying, yeah, it's not going to get any better than this, so we're calling it here. And you know what? I can respect that. Rogue One was the last time I was excited to see a new piece of Star Wars content, and it was the last time that I left the theater even moderately happy with the story I'd seen. Over time, I've come to champion this movie as a symbol of what can be done with the Star Wars IP, of what you can accomplish when you remove all the bullshit and focus on making a good story well told. I firmly believe that there are people out there who can do this, who can take the utter wreckage and laughingstock that Disney has turned Star Wars into and bring it back from the brink. I know they're out there. I know they're waiting. They just need a chance. And we need them. Now more than ever, we need them. We need people who love this IP, not for what it can give them or for what kind of message they can force down our throats with it. We need people who love it for what it is, who can save it. As Saw Gerrera said, we need people who can save the dream. Anyway, that's all I've got for you this time, so if you could do me a favor and hit the like and subscribe buttons, I'd really appreciate it. Every little bit really helps me out. Also, go ahead and check out the other videos on my channel, or hit up my website to see my blog and maybe buy one of my books on Amazon. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.